Hello, sophomores. I'm Eddie. I'm here filling in for Islam. Today, we're going to be doing some review of Illustrator and going over your final week for multimedia design, week 5. So, let's begin. Due this upcoming Sunday, you have your final draft of the infographic project. We have gone into Canvas and given you all feedback on your projects that you've submitted. That'll be your draft 2, which is week 4. So if you go back there, you'll be able to see the feedback that we've given you. You're going to be taking that feedback, incorporating it into your final drafts, and then making that submission for this upcoming week. So once you're reading through that, you'll need to keep in mind the 3 B's of receiving feedback. So we're going to review that for the 3rd time here. For the first one, you're going to, before you even open up that project to look at the feedback that we've given you, you just want to be open, keep an open mind. We are your instructors and we understand there's a difference in power there. So what you all want to do is you want to make sure to keep an open mind, and when you look at the feedback, we're not trying to degrade you or say that your work's terrible. We're really here to give you feedback on what you need for your final project. Also, you're going to keep in mind to have a better product mindset. So I actually want to edit this one a little bit and just think best. So you've done your first draft, you've done your second draft. We want to see your best work on this final product once you turn it in. So our feedback is going to be geared towards that, and we're taking that into account. Think about how to push your products to the next level. And lastly, our feedback that we're giving you is to benefit your product overall. So keep that in mind and just take everything with that mindset of, hey, I'm going to push myself to do my best work. All right. Next, we're going to go into graphic design. So we're going to go over just some basic principles of graphic design and how to incorporate that into your product. So if you remember from week 2, we went over the PARC system. That's the P-A-R-C, and I'll go over what each of those stand for. The first is proximity. So depending on how close or far you have elements from each other, that will tell your audience whether or not those elements are related or not. So if you have, for example, in your infographic, you're describing one school, you might want to put all of the information from that school together, but that might also separate the different types of information you're giving. So let's say you're breaking down your population by race in the school, or if you're breaking down the distance to that school, you might want to have that somewhere related to it so that your audience can relate. Oh, this is for this school and this school and this school in a similar location. So proximity is going to be important. The next thing you have is alignment. So I'll go over a little bit of some of the alignment tools in Illustrator, but what alignment is it's how images are displayed on your page. So you can align things to center, you can align things left or right, and alignment keeps everything kind of nice and neat and make sure that things aren't just as 0.5% off. And for people who are type A, this is going to come in really handy when you're working on this because you'll be able to see those things and spot them right away. The next is repetition. So a repeated element kind of gives your design cohesion and it makes everything kind of come together. So think about your color scheme being repetitive. Think about for the different graphs that you're using for each school, you should use the same kind of graph. Using different types of graphs may throw people off. And lastly, we have contrast. So with contrast, you want to think about the value of the color that you're using. So that can be whether you're adding tint to an image or to a color, which is adding white, or if you're adding shade to an image, which is adding black to the image. So contrast is going to really help to bring certain images forward and certain depictions forward and move certain depictions back to the background. If two things are very similar, they're going to blend together. If two things are very contrasting, they're going to actually move apart, and it's going to show a strong distinction. So that's the PARC system there for you. Next, let's hop into Illustrator. I'm going to show you what I mean by all of these terms with the PARC system here. All right. So here we have a simple document just demonstrating the relation between different colors, different percentages. So here we have 75% and 25%. I have these ones to scale, but what I don't have to scale is this 10%. So 25% I have here at 75.25, 75% I have 75 is 3 times 25, just basic math review here. And how would I calculate this 25 to 10%? Well, if I don't know how to do it by head, which I don't, I can pull up the calculator. Every Windows computer has one of these. You can actually just type that in. And I can put in my numbers here. So I have 10 over 25, which is my fraction here, which is 0.4. So I can take that number, 0.4, and then multiply it by my number here, which is 75.25. And I get 30.1. So my size in points for this is going to be 30.1. There you go. So this is an accurate to-scale depiction of 10%, 25, and 75% in my sizes of my fonts. So you pick a font to start with, a font size to start with, then you can scale it up or down by just throwing it into the calculator, doing the math calculation of that ratio between the two numbers. I hope all of you have taken fractions. And then that's how you would calculate the different sizes of your fonts. The next thing I can do is my numbers here, although this looks kind of nice, my numbers here are spaced out in a way that's not really aligned at all. So I can use the alignment tools. If I hold down Control and click on, actually Shift, if I hold down Shift and click on each one of my numbers, it will select all of them together as a group. And then in my top right-hand corner here, I have my align tools. So what I can do is I can center them if I would like, have them going top to bottom. I'm actually going to align mine to the right-hand side, kind of like how that looks here. And I'm going to overlap them a little bit with my text in the back. This is showing things kind of moving front to back as well in relation to one another. And the next thing I'm going to do in my align tools is I can vertically distribute the center of my objects, which didn't work. I'm going to go, that doesn't work very well actually for this particular example. If you have objects that are the same size, it's going to work a lot better to equally distribute them top to bottom. In this case, I can kind of eyeball it, and I'm just going to move them, I'm going to move the 10 down a little bit so that they seemingly are spaced pretty evenly here. I think that looks decent. All right. There we go. And another thing to point out as well is I have a pretty nice color scheme going here. So I have the green in the background, and I have a lighter green here on these numbers. And this is just the same color, just added tint to it, moved it a little bit closer to white. And I can do that here by moving this guy around. And another thing that you can do is you can also change the spacing of your characters, which is what I did for the background here. You can do that by going to the leading on your characters.
It's pronounced leading.
Leading, thank you. And you can increase that to separate them, like thusly, and you can decrease that to move them together. I like when I have certain elements like this in this particular instance because it's in the background, and I'm just trying to push it to the back and give it a nice graphical depiction here. I can move that leading to 0 and actually have my numbers kiss. Now, I don't want to do that for other elements because what that ends up doing is it creates, and this is also not a great example because this makes it look nice, and in this case, but in not all cases will having all your elements touching like that create a nice visual. In this case it works, but for the most part, it's not something that you want to do. Unless you're using it for, like I said, for a graphical representation of some text. So once again, my color scheme here is really nice because I have this dark green. Having these two not contrast too much from each other blends them together and sends them to the back. And then my other numbers, white, contrasts really well with that darker background, so it pulls it to the front. All right. And I'm going to align these again before we hop out of here. Boom. There we go. So that's this I wouldn't accept as a final product for your projects. What you would need is a title, which I do have. You would need 3 graphs, as well as more information about each graph. So you'll also need a little bit of description as well. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hop into Canvas, and I'm just going to show you all what you have due this upcoming week. So for week 5, you have the weekly video, you have your infographic submission, which I'll go through in just a moment, and you also have a quiz. Before we go to the submission, a good thing to look at first is just look at the feedback that we've given you so far. Look through that and make any changes there, and then you can go to your infographic submission. And here we have the beginning infographic activity prompt, which you should still have. Hopefully you hung on to that from kickoff. And this actually describes what you will need to include in your final product. First, we have the schools that you'll need to research. That's kind of a given here. You'll have 3 different schools. You have your color scheme. That I'll be able to look at and just visually see. And then you have your points of comparison. So 3 different points of comparison. You'll need 3 different representations for each of those, whether those be graph tools, numbers being larger or smaller, like I just showed, or images. And you can use images in different ways, as we showed during kickoff. And then you're going to be submitting that. What you will need to do is submit that as a JPG image and go File, Save for Web. You can change the type to JPEG, which saves it as a .jpg image. And then you can save that for web and then upload it to the submission area. And that's what you'll need to submit for this week and do the quiz as well, which will be due on Sunday. All right, so does anyone have any questions for me? Yes.
I'm curious. This is. Are we presenting these at fall cohort?
Yes. So that was something that I did leave out. But these infographic projects that you have, you're submitting them this week, but you'll be presenting them at fall cohort. Follow-up question.
So my question about that is, why do I have to have it finished this week when fall cohort for me is in either 2 or 3 weeks from now?
Yes. So next week, we're going to be starting our next unit, which is Intro to Sound Design. For this week, you'll be submitting your final draft for infographics. Because we'll be moving into another unit, you won't have any time at fall cohort to work on that. And we will be starting our next unit, so you should really be caught up with what we're doing and staying on track with each individual week. So that's why we're submitting our final drafts today, and we'll be moving on to our next unit. Great question. Yes?
Let's say for some personal reasons you're not able to turn in a final infographic this week. What should we do?
Yes. So if for any reason, on any week actually, not just this week, you feel like you're not able to turn in that assignment by Sunday at 11:59, make sure to send us an email long before that time if possible. If not, just as long as it's before the due date, send us an email, let us know what's going on, and we should be able to work with you, try to come up with a plan on what to do next. With that being said as well, if you have any other questions, be sure to send us an email before the due date of the assignment, and that way we can get back to you and let you know what's going on before that due date. Just make sure to contact us. Yes?
What will the structure of the presentation at cohort look like for the infographic?
Yes, so you will have about 2 to 3 minutes to actually present what you have on your infographic. It's just going to be a brief description of what you found while doing your college research. And it's just to get you some exposure to presenting, because you're going to be doing a lot more of that through the next couple years. And yeah, you're just going to have a brief presentation. It's not going to be super in depth. You don't have to like write up a whole script or anything. Just a simple 2 to 3 minute presentation of what you found. Any other questions? All right. You all have a wonderful week. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.